Well, they cover 70% of the planet, with over 3 billion people relying on them for their livelihood. So it goes without saying that oceans should be a major priority when it comes to addressing climate change. But they're in the relatively unique position as well as being among the biggest victims of global warming, and also increasingly viewed as a possible solution, notably through things like climate capture and even more controversially, deep sea mining. For more, Anne-Sophie Roux is on set with me now. She's an ocean activist and the Deep Sea Mining Europe lead at the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for you.
So before we get to deep sea mining, there's just about a week left to go of the COP28 climate summit. Has the state of oceans or protecting them been an important theme this year, at least as important as it should be? And have you seen any significant announcements on that?
I think the ocean is not being considered enough in the climate negotiations and also in the biodiversity negotiations, because, as you said, it's the biggest ecosystem of our planet. It regulates at 95% the excess heat in the atmosphere, and it's our biggest carbon sink. So if we don't take enough the ocean into consideration, we are not able to cope with the impacts of the climate crisis, right? So I think there is progress being made, especially since the Paris Agreement, but there are a lot of things to be made more, to integrate ocean climate solutions more.
So speaking of progress, outside of the context of COP, there have been a couple major victories this year as far as protecting oceans goes, that the Oceans Treaty, et cetera. What do you think is the most significant positive step forward that you've seen in this past year?
The High Seas Treaty is definitely one of the major achievements, because it's also the result of more than 20 years of negotiations. So it's been a very, very long time. And also another significant thing for me is the awareness raising around deep sea mining and the fact that more and more governments are calling against this industry, which would have irreversible consequences on ocean, marine life, fisheries, but also our global climate. And that is also very good news, because we have a unique opportunity today to prevent the start of a destructive industry that would have global consequences. So it's very important as well.
We're definitely going to get to that, especially the news about Norway, which I'm sure you've been working on. But before we do, this progress obviously comes as the state of the oceans has arguably never been as dire as it is today. We saw 2023, they reached their hottest ever record temperature. Is the progress that you've seen enough, in your view, to match the gravity of the situation?
No, definitely not. I think the path of reduction of the fossil fuels, which is the main cause of the rising temperature and the depletion of all ecosystems, is definitely not being fast enough in regards to what's happening for the ocean. The impacts are really like a waterfall impacts we have on the climate, on the rising of extreme meteorological events, marine heat waves, impact on marine biodiversity, and therefore impacts on us, because almost half of the global population depends on fisheries. And so it's really the scale of the impacts, I think, doesn't match the scale of the ambition that is shown today in climate negotiations, and there are still a lot of things to do.
One more thing before we get to deep sea mining, I promise, but oceans again have been increasingly framed as being able to offer solutions, if you will, to the climate crisis. And one of those is carbon capture, once quite controversial, but I think now many say that the technology is getting better and better. Do you see this as a viable solution, or just kind of an extension of some of the problems that we see in terms of dealing with climate change?
Well, the ocean in itself is already our biggest carbon sink, and coastal ecosystems sequester a huge amount of carbon. For instance, mangroves sequester between 3 and 5 times more CO2 than terrestrial forests per unit area. So I think naturally the ecosystems, marine ecosystems, are already huge carbon sinks. So I don't really believe that technology will save us in this way. But if we put in place marine protected areas that are fully and strictly protected, if we restore marine ecosystem, if we prevent like industries like deep sea mining from starting, all of this can have a big impact, because the ocean is very resilient and it has a huge impact for all of us. And we still have time to make this impact, but it has to be now.
Now, deep sea mining, you're a specialist, of course. I was really surprised to learn that anything with the word mining in it can be considered as a solution to the climate crisis. But there are people out there who are saying that it can help us. Why is it being pitched, at least by some, as something that could be positive? And what is so valuable more generally about the resources deep on the seabed?
So deep sea mining is basically an industry where a few mining companies want to extract minerals from the depth of the ocean, so cobalt, nickel, manganese. And the main argument that they put forward is the fact that deep sea mining is needed for green transitions. But this argument is actually being debunked by independent scientists who says that innovation in the battery making and investment in circular economy and recycling would help us to meet the demand. And it's basically an industry that could start in the coming months and years. And all the scientific community agrees that we should put in place a moratorium, concretely to press the pause button, because the deep sea ecosystems are very not well known. 90% of deep sea species have not been described by scientists, and we know more the surface of the moon than the depths of our ocean. And also because the impacts would be irreversible on climate, biodiversity, fisheries, and us all. So that's why it's a very pressing issue. And today we have 24 states that are calling for a moratorium or a ban, like France. And on the other side, we have Norway that wants to open the doors to deep sea mining in the Arctic, which is a very, very crucial ecosystem for the stability and the regulation of our global climate. So what's happening in Norway now concerns us all.
You mentioned what's happened in Norway. That's, the country paving the path for opening the Arctic to seabed mining. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned that moratorium earlier. So do you think that this move by Norway could be the beginning of the end of that moratorium on mining, on deep sea mining?
It would create a massive precedent, that's for sure, whether it's on one way or the other. Whether Norway is the first country to open the door to a highly controversial and damaging industry without having the idea of the full scale of the impact that it would have for all humanity. Either Norway is really a climate leader, like it claims it is on the international stage at COP28, etc., and it listens to scientists, and then it puts in place the moratorium. But I think it won't change anything on the fact that in international waters, the movement is really growing against deep sea mining, and more governments are listening to scientists and realizing that we can't cope with the impacts of the climate and the biodiversity crisis if we don't have a healthy and functioning ocean. So the vote in Norway would be in January 9th of next year, and it will be absolutely critical.
Anne-Sophie Roux, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks
and for bringing awareness to this rather, I think, understated element of the climate crisis.
Thank you so much.